Okay, let me see. Thanks again for joining me. I did a live one earlier today. Hopefully you get a chance to check that one out. It's on Facebook and YouTube, trying to get on different platforms. And as I've been mentioning all along the past few days, some people that are working on a documentary, a docu-series over my journeys with Jesus the past maybe 15, 16 years. And will lead into a movie that they're also working on. Half of the script has been written so far. There'll be some amazing things that come out of that, and to God be all the glory. It's only taken 17 years. It's an overnight success, right? So anyways, they're working on that. Please pray for them. I'm still doing the Lozenger thing because I'm dealing with the sinus, allergies, cold, whatever is going on. Since I got back from New Mexico, it's been a week and a half. I've talked to someone today who's suffering along the same lines. So, might be able to hear it in my voice a little bit. But anyway, thank you so much for prayers. Thanks for support. There are some things in the works. And I wanted to share with you some of the journeys, some of the background of my world. You know, I'll be 67 in about a month. And I came to Christ when I was 31 years old. So I had before Jesus, after Jesus, during Jesus, all these other things. And so there are many other parts of me that people have known me probably for 16, 17 years and what I'm doing for worship music and whatever, but have no idea that there was other things that were developing, other skill sets, other stuff, like most people. Sometimes you have no idea. You meet someone maybe in the retirement and you don't even know who they are, and you're standing next to them in the produce thing at Walmart and you're like, can you hurry up? And you don't realize really who that person is in front of you. And now as I realize, as I'm getting older and slash whatever, there's probably some people around me going, can you hurry up? And so anyway, this particular story, is, I'll describe it, but it's a story also that I'm still friends with this pastor currently, and it's been now since 2006, 2007 when I first met him. But here's the story concerning he wanted to meet Cheryl Dindy and many others over the years. And so here we go. It's called Forerunner for the King. The definition of a forerunner, a person or a thing that precedes the coming or development of something or someone or something else. My wife and I just sat across the table from this pastor of a church where I've been doing 24/7 worship music for almost a year. Many good, loving people were trying to reach out to my wife, but she was having nothing to do with any of these invitations from anyone. So sitting at dinner with this pastor was truly a miracle. When I told her the pastor was in town and asked us to dinner, she thought about it for a minute and said yes. I was not living at home with her or my 3 girls, and I was not welcome to stay, so her accepting this invitation was truly amazing. The waitress came by and gave us our drinks and placed them on the table and took our food order. The pastor looked across the table and said to Cheryl, tell me your story. I did not have a clue what she was going to say. She said, when Bobby came back into my life, he was doing a radio show for youth. He was a producer and spending about 60 hours a week putting this 2-hour show together that he was producing it live every week. They paid him just a few dollars a week to do this, and they were trying to raise money to pay for airtime. She said, I love the show, but the support was next to nothing, especially for his talent and his time, but he loved it. And God called him to it. This is Cheryl talking. We were going to a very large church at the time, and they asked him to play music at these church events and gave him nothing for his time. He brought his sound equipment, set it up, took it down, and he went to many youth camps just to support the kids. And all the time, we could have been doing corporate DJ gigs and bringing in money for our family. We were asking for help to reach the youth. No one was helping us. The pastor looked at me and back to my wife, Cheryl, and said, I'm sorry. I said the drive my wife had to reach the young people was real. She understood the importance of the time that we lived in. And the challenge, and it really did challenge me to do things in excellence to reach this generation. When we first got back together, I was producing a radio show. And she said to me, we need to be better than MTV. You need to get on radio and television and reach these kids. That was 1994. and at the time, we had only been married a few months. From 1994 until today, in the year 2025, nothing really has changed. It's so much more important now to reach the youth. My wife went on to tell the pastor at our table that day, we are not trying to get rich, we just need to live and take care of our children. Sitting next to her was not easy. My heart was still broken from just over a year earlier when she and the Lord kicked me out of the house. That was 1996. You following me? She told me then, I'm tired of all this, not being able to support our family. You can find more of that story in my book, Journey for the King, the first book, Faith Walker. I'm just sharing the events of a family that's called of God to reach this generation in their own backyard. I told the pastor at our dinner table about the 2 services at church one Sunday morning that ended up being the very last straw for my wife. We'd been going to a church of about 5,000 people at the time, and I shared with the pastor of the church my desire to reach the college-age students at Lake Havasu City in Arizona during spring break. I had heard of the events that led to the deaths and the other tragic events that go on there during spring break. And this is like 1994, 95 that was happening. And so this particular time when we were having dinner with the pastor, and it was 1996. And so the pastor listened and said, Bobby, the pastor of the church that we're going to said, Bobby, I will bring you before both services Sunday morning so you can share your vision to reach the college students. I was excited for the opportunity to share and was sure people, especially those in leadership of the church, would get on board and help. The first service that morning was packed. The senior pastor introduced me to the congregation. It's not like I did not know a few thousand of them. For 4 years, I was a volunteer at every youth camp from 5th and 6th grade all the way up through high school. I had a few years that I invested into their children. When I was finished, the pastor took the microphone and said that he and the board would get together. He was sure they could help me. He said the same thing at the second service. So there it was. I was able to bring the vision to the entire congregation that day. It was days later when the pastor would call me and said, Bobby, I'm sorry the board met and they said they're not willing to help you in what you're planning to do in Lake Havasu. It's not from God. So let me stop there. So here I'm sending this church of 5,000. 4 years I'm single. Cheryl wasn't back in my life. I'm committing all my time, my efforts, my equipment to minister to their kids, to minister to the camp, to minister to this rich mega church. And the pastor's saying, hey, I believe in what you're doing. We'll talk to the congregation. And so he talks to the congregation. I share my story, talks to the leaders, and the leaders say, no, we don't believe this is from God. Well, there's going to be some stories down the line here where 13 years of my life, I went to Lake Havasu City with Pastor Chris Bly from Lake Havasu City and spent 13 years reaching tens of thousands of college students. You're going to like these stories. Unfortunately, my friend Pastor Chris had passed on, and he's now with the Lord. That's the good thing, but he struggled with a 5-year battle with cancer. That's one of the reasons, because I'm going to South Padre Island 2026 for a couple weeks to be amongst over 100,000 college students, because I made this pastor back then a promise after being with him for 13 years. So let me continue. My wife told the pastor at the dinner table that she had enough of our pastor preaching on reaching out to this generation, only to have thousands of people clapping their hands and getting excited and doing absolutely nothing about what was going on with the youth that day. Hello? She said, I can't take it anymore. So there it was. The people excited, but no one wanted to help reach out and help us reach the youth. The pastor looked across the table and said, Cheryl, I could not figure out what was wrong in your relationship and in your marriage and what was going on with Bobby. Was he in sin? Or just disobedience to the Lord? Or was it something else? The pastor looked at me and then my wife and said, I understand now. That was intense. You two are forerunners in this music ministry, and you got the crap beat out of you. No one was praying for you and your family. I told the pastor, my wife has always told me, if you would go and build relationship with people and they get to know your heart, they will help you. Not so easy for people to understand what I do until they experience what I do by the Spirit of God. So you don't get what I do till you get what I do, and that's by the Holy Spirit. You don't get what I do until the Spirit of God moves on you. And that's why I'm doing these stories. And that's why I'm going to tell you some stories. I'm going to tell you some true stories where out of obedience I did what God asked me to do. And he moved on people, he moved on hearts, and miracles happened. And so much of these stories, and in this book and in the first book, let me also tell you that my adult children now don't even know these stories. Because of what happened, because of all this abuse, because of all the stuff, my children, except Cass Dindy, wanted nothing to do with God anymore. Because God had taken Dad away. No, God didn't take Dad away. I let the cares and the other things of this world and people pressuring me to come help them take Dad away. So this is some of the stories. And it's really awesome that I can share some of those stories now. I can share some of those stories now, and my adult children can maybe understand what was going on, because they were just little at the time. And Keely and Cass weren't born, and Kristen was 4 years old when we got married. Yikes, you have to hear that story. Not so easy for people to understand what I do until they experience what I do by the Spirit of God. So now the pastor had an understanding why my wife was done with me in the church. She still loved God, and she still does. I told him she begged me a few times to get a full-time job and maybe do some corporate DJ gigs, and we will just go to church on Sunday like other people, like you maybe, and just take care of our family, which is awesome, and live our lives, which is awesome. I tried many times to do that, but could not be a normal Sunday Christian. The pastor said, "Thank you for sharing your story with me." He said, "I'll be praying for you." I drove my wife back to her house after dinner and thanked her for coming and speaking to this pastor. She was still mad at me for not giving up this crazy ministry. There's a lot of years she's mad at me. A lot of years I was going around with a broken heart. A lot of years, broken heart. A lot of times people in my broken heart couldn't even be around me because they felt they couldn't stand to see my heart was so broken over my family. She was still mad at me and was still not going up, not giving up this crazy ministry, and my heart was still broken. And I was not welcome at her house, but I could see my children if I wanted to. There is a cost to being a forerunner in anything. This was costing me more than I thought I could stand in my life. Definitely more than my broken heart could take. I knew that the broken pieces of my heart were in Jesus' hands, broken over my wife, over my children, broken over a generation of young people, broken over those blinded in the churches by this world and what it has to offer. You would have thought I would abandon this painful mission and just pick up the pieces of my life and my broken family. But this was just the beginning of a long journey to lay down my life and pick up the cross. And that's what so much of all these stories are about, especially over the past 17, 18 years, and there's a lot of them. I found that there's not a long line of people that go into the dying to self line. You know that line, different lines going up to a counter. There's not a lot of people in the line that's the dying to self line. Yeah. There's no buddy system. You have to make this choice on your own. I would revisit the dying to self line many times over the next 12 years, which now have been 16 years, knowing that it has become a way of life so that Christ in me has to take the first place over my life, that I might be used for the purposes of the King and his kingdom. I know that's a lot of words to say. Not my will, but thy will be done. This lesson of dying to self and picking up the will of God would be a lifelong lesson and just the beginning of a journey that I'm still traveling on today. Just Jesus. So, Cheryl really never wanted to get too close to the fire. She knew supernatural things, and I'm going to tell you stories where she was there, my children were there, and the Spirit of God, the glory of God, the kabod showed up, got pictures. Many places that some of you know where I've been. You've seen those pictures, you've experienced that presence, whatever, but it didn't come without a cost, and it still hasn't come without a cost. So, this is, it's interesting, this story I'm going to tell you right now, because it happened in 2012. But it happened at this particular time that we're at right now, in this particular date, in this week that we're in. It actually happened October 25th through what would be Halloween, was the original vision of this story in 2012. And so I'm going to read you the story because it's interesting. I'm reliving this whole thing now. And it's called Warfare and Worship. We've talked to God, and he's not to come at this time. He brings too much warfare and worship. I thought to myself, did I just really hear that over the phone? The one speaking was the prayer pastor of this mega church. And why did her voice change when she was speaking? And who is we? Wow. Remember, these stories I'm telling you are documented. These stories I can tell you, I have witnesses. These stories I'm telling you are not like, oh, I made up a creative story. I live this. And I have people that were around me that live this. So when I'm sharing this with you and sharing whatever like that, there are people who can verify this really did happen. I brought a prophetic word to the senior pastor of this church. And also, by the way, at this time also, I'm not welcome in Cheryl's house. I'm not living with her, and I'm welcome to live with her. And I'm just being obedient to what God has called me to do in this particular season, like every season. I had brought a prophetic word to the senior pastor of this church, not the church I just talked about, just a few days earlier at one of the 3 morning services. At the time, he asked me, what is it the Lord would have you to do at my church? I told him when I came to deliver this word to him, I saw a vision of me doing 24/7 worship in the southeast corner of this parking lot. He asked me when I wanted to start, and I told him as soon as I can. He told me to call him Tuesday, and we'll arrange it. I've always respected this pastor and his family. They truly love people, and his hunger for a true move of God was always on the forefront of his heart. When I called on Tuesday, I was on a conference call with him, another pastor that I knew, and then was introduced to this prayer pastor of his church who joined in. The senior pastor said, Bobby, tell me again, what is it that you want to do? I shared with them that what I believe the Lord wanted me to do. I indicated that I want to be on the property October 25th, playing 7 days of 24/7 worship, ending on the 31st, October 31st. The prayer pastor then spoke up and shared with everyone the battle they were having with witches and warlocks on their property. Interesting. And then she said, we have talked to God, and Bobby is not to come at this time. He brings too much warfare and worship. You have no idea how this lines up and how much warfare. And I'm telling some of those stories. Again, not to glorify the enemy, but to glorify God. You see how it turns out. The senior pastor said, Bobby, you have my permission to come here on those dates and do worship. A few days later, I arrived at the church and set up my trailer and speakers to start playing worship music. I told people many times, not everybody loves you because you love Jesus. Not everybody loves you because you follow Jesus. Not everybody loves you because you believe in Jesus. But Jesus loves you. And the people that you will touch and share and may come to know Jesus, it's always about the one. The senior pastor brought out his entire staff to greet me in the parking lot the very first day. The prayer pastor and the prayer pastor. The pastor told his staff, please help Bobby in any way you can. He lives by faith and travels as the Lord leads him. I greeted them all as we spoke for a few minutes, and then they turned and started walking across this huge parking lot back to the church. This is a mega church, I think about 11,000 at the time. When they were halfway across the parking lot, the prayer pastor turned back and walked toward me. She was an older woman, probably in her late 60s or early 70s. She came up to me and said, it will do you no good being here for the next 7 days. I looked her in the eyes and said, we'll see about that. I ended up staying and sleeping and playing worship music in that parking lot for 120 days. And every day, and I have friends who will watch this right now, I can have you talk to them. Every day, miracles happen in that parking lot. And I'm still writing 2 accounts of my time there. You'll be able to read about some of those, and you'll be able to hear about those pretty soon. There's always been a battle over worship. And over the past 31 years of doing 24/7 worship, DJ-led worship, I have hundreds, and there are really thousands of stories if I just really went down to it. But we're in the hundreds. It's always been difficult for me when I hear a pastor tell the Sunday morning worship team, thank you for leading us into the presence of the Lord and the throne room. Here we go. Here we go. I'm thinking, seriously? 3 or 4 songs, that has brought us into the throne room of God where we can get up and then leave and go to for lunch? Oh! What throne room? What room are you talking about? I'm sorry. If we were in the throne room to begin with, If we were really there, you wouldn't get up and leave. I did 9 years doing worship music with group home kids, where the presence and the glory of God came through in supernatural things to heal their souls. And let me tell you something. When God comes in a measure that you can't measure, you ain't getting up off the floor. You ain't getting up off the pew because you're running to Starbucks. You ain't getting up and you have 2 services and your worship team runs off to Starbucks. And I know who you are because I was with you guys when you're doing all that. Really? It's that strong. It's that powerful service that once you finish your worship set, you're off to Starbucks. You're off to your coffee place to get back before the next service, before the first service ends and the next service starts. Really? It's that powerful. It's only as powerful as you know. And there's so much more. We were created to worship the King, and we give him 25 minutes of corporate worship once a week. You really think we're doing the damage to the kingdom of darkness with this form of worship? Satan was the worship leader of heaven and knows the power and authority that comes with worshiping the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So here on earth, he uses all he has to distract us in worship, all kinds of things, including the things that take our eyes off of Jesus. I have to stop there for now, right? And I do. After my 120 days of worship in this parking lot and living in this mega church, my next assignment would keep me in Phoenix for over a year. I know the pastor of this next church really well. And let me tell you, of the story I just told you of this time 12 years ago, I have other stories in here, and you're going to find it amazing because I'm going to tell a few of those stories of 120 days and every day a miracle for 120 days. I'm living in a box trailer, playing worship music, and I'm going to tell you some of the stories. But now we're going to continue on. The story continues on. After my 120 days of worship in a parking lot of this mega church, my next assignment would keep me in Phoenix, Arizona for over a year. I know the pastor of this next church really well. He was the one who the Lord used to lead me to Jesus Christ in January of 1990. When I came to his church, it was a congregation of about 400 at the time, with an on-fire youth group of about 100. In my meeting with the pastor and his staff, I told them I'd like to do 24/7 worship outside on the front lawn of the church with speakers facing the busy street that ran right in front of the church. They agreed. So I brought my 18-foot cargo trailer and set speakers out in front of their church and kept the rest of my DJ gear set up in the trailer. I've been playing worship music for a few weeks, and the Lord was doing some amazing things out there. I continued to play worship music every day, and it was now Mother's Day. And the interesting thing, too, is when I came here, you guys, I'm not living at home with Cheryl. I'm not living whatever. I'm actually living on the floor of this church, playing music in the morning. They gave me a key to the church, which was amazing. So I'm able to sleep there, sleep out in the cargo, the trailer, whatever, but I'm playing music every day. And that was going on. I continued to play worship music every day, and it was now Mother's Day, Sunday, May 8th. And this is amazing because it was 2011. So I guess that was 2011 when I was in the other church. That morning, I had been playing music out in front of the church while everyone was arriving for the morning service. I was inside the trailer with my DJ gear and a few hundred worship CDs that I made to give away that morning. I was looking at all the CDs in the trailer when I thought, why are all these CDs here? And what was this equipment for? I was very confused. I thought, where am I? At the moment, my friends Ron and his wife Denise looked into the trailer and said, "Hi, Bobby, how you doing?" I looked at them confused, and I was thinking, who are these people? And why am I standing in this trailer? I could see a very concerned looks on their faces, but didn't understand why. Ron said, "Do you know who we are, Bobby?" I looked at them and couldn't place how I knew them. I said, "I think you live up north," and I was trying to figure it out. It was like I knew, but I couldn't find the information in my head. That's when Denise said she'd be right back and ran off to get her shofar. Returning with her shofar, she walked up the ramp of my trailer and blew the shofar towards me. I was thinking, that's a cool sound, but I still had no idea what was happening to me. Both Ron and Denise were very concerned, and I said, "Oh, you live in Camp Verde up north." And I remembered a little bit about them. They said, "Let's go into the church, Bobby." By this time, people were filing into the church, and the women were being handed carnations. I was sitting in the back with Ron and Denise and couldn't figure out what Mother's Day was. Remember I talked about warfare? Remember I talked about that? The service began, and they played a short video that the kids had made for the moms. I still didn't understand what was going on, and then I started speaking this strange language that I didn't know. I kept speaking this language until the video ended, and then I sort of came to and felt okay. I stayed for the rest of the service and was back to normal. After service, Ron and Denise asked if I was okay and asked me if I wanted to go to the hospital. I told them I was okay. Let's go eat lunch. Crazy. So off we went. All through lunch, I was fine, and then returned to the church. Remember, I'm living at that church, in the church, with a sleeping bag and a pillow. I thanked Ron and Denise for their help, and they left to return to Camp Verde. I was sleeping at the church while I had 24/7 worship music going on. That was my home for now. Later that afternoon, my friends David and Lori stopped by the church to say hi. I was telling them the events of the morning, and Lori said, "Give me your hand." She put her fingers on my wrist to check my pulse. She made a phone call to a friend who was an air evac medic. After talking to her friend, and she said, "We can call an ambulance or we can drive you to the hospital." Lori said, closest hospital, Thunderbird Hospital, was about a mile away. I told her I didn't have insurance for that hospital, but if they could drive me to Phoenix Indian Hospital, I'm totally covered there. She said, "Fine, get in the car." The hospital started running tests, and after a few hours, the doctors came and told me they'd like to do a brain scan. However, their machine was down, and they would have to send me by ambulance the next day to another hospital. They said, "Everything looks okay now, but we believe from what you told us that you may have had a small stroke." I told the doctors I have a friend that's going to come pick me up. They indicated I'd have to sign a waiver releasing them from all responsibility. And if I leave the hospital and die before I can get help, that's why they want me to sign. Well, that was short and to the point, but it's what they have to do. I told them I'd sign the waiver, and I did sign the waiver. The doctors proceeded to call and schedule my brain scan at another hospital. I called my friend David to come and get me and take me back to church. Again, that's where I'm living. A few days later, I had the brain scan at another hospital, and everything was okay from what they could see. It was now the following Sunday, and church was starting in about 20 minutes. I was outside by the trailer with my worship music going. I had just closed the back ramp of the trailer, and all of a sudden my heart started racing. I remember what they told me at the hospital a week earlier. If you have any symptoms, call an ambulance right away. There was a Walgreens convenience store about a half a block away. They had a free blood pressure machine. I knew I needed to have my blood pressure checked, so I started walking toward the store. Then I realized I was in trouble. I walked back to the church, and my friend Chris greeted me at the front door. I told him, "Call an ambulance. I need help." I walked into the church and sat back. Chris was a bit nervous and said he didn't have a cell phone. I told him, "Use mine." He calls 911, is speaking with them, and gets disconnected. Warfare and worship. He looks at me and tells me he just got disconnected and calls him again. This time he gets through and says an ambulance is on its way. Chris runs off to get his wife, who's in a choir practice. She comes out and takes my pulse. Chris tells her an ambulance is on the way. One of the ladies from the choir, who's a doctor, comes over and asks if there's a way to take my blood pressure. Someone ran off to get the gear from the church and the nearby first aid kit. After the doctor took my blood pressure, she looked very serious. She had a very serious look on her face. And she said to Chris and his wife, "Is there an ambulance on the way, right? There's an ambulance on the way?" And Chris said, "Should be here anytime." Just then the paramedics walked in. I heard the fire truck and the ambulance just a minute earlier. People were still coming into the church, watching the paramedics work on me. I was given a pill to put under my tongue. They're hooking me up to an oxygen tank with a mask over my face and taking my vitals. And the whole time there were 3 grandmas right behind me. Thank God for them grandmas. They were right behind me praying and speaking in tongues. The paramedics looked a bit confused at what the ladies were doing. Through the oxygen mask on my face, I told the paramedics, "It's okay. They're just praying for me." Well, it was now time to take a ride on the stretcher. So out the church, I go in an ambulance. They loaded me in and told me they're taking me to Thunderbird Hospital, about a mile away. I told them I have medical coverage at Phoenix Indian Hospital. They said, "No, we have checked. You have access medical insurance." I thought, wow, I didn't know I was still registered with them. It had been years since I'd used that medical coverage. So off to Thunderbird Hospital I go. If I had known I could have gone there a week earlier, I would have had my friends Dave and Lori take me there. On the ride over, the medics were talking with the hospital, so when I arrived, they knew everything about me. My records from Phoenix Indian Hospital were en route to Thunderbird Hospital. As I arrived, they prepped me quickly with a heart monitor. They came in, hooked me up to the machine, and after that, I got hold of my wife and told her where I was. She arrived very quickly, and she had that look in her eyes, like, what in the world are you going through now? There's been a few other times that she's had that look. On so many of my journeys around the country, I would have some near-death experiences. You know, things like loads falling off the back of a truck in front of me at 75 miles an hour, metal pieces of an overpass bridge falling right in front of me, big rig trucks running me off the road while I'm pulling a trailer, and so much more. It got to the point after a while, Cheryl said, don't even tell me anymore, please. They still happen. She goes, could you not tell me about those experiences? I'm already worried about you enough. So when she saw me hooked up to the heart machine and a few other things, including an IV, she said, what's going on? I told her the usual. The enemy's trying to take me out again. Her eyes teared up as she looked at me. I told her, it's going to be okay. I've had to tell her that many times. I'm just hoping I stay around long enough to see God bless her for all that she's gone through in these journeys. That's why I'm maybe out of all of this and all that she's gone through, there'll be a blessing beyond a blessing that will help her and my children and my grandchildren. The doctor came in and told me they were going to keep me for a few days and run some tests. She said, I see from your medical records from Phoenix Indian Hospital, they believe you had a stroke last Sunday. I said, yes, that was a tough day. And they laughed. The doctor smiled and told me they weren't letting me out of here anytime soon, and they were going to get some answers. As I thanked her, she told me they were getting a room ready for me. A short time later, a few friends came to check on me. David and Lori were there. Another couple of friends were there. A couple of friends were there that have now gone to be with Jesus. Boy, do I miss them. A male nurse came by about an hour later and asked me if I was ready to go to my room. I said, yes. He said, I'm going to get you in a wheelchair and we're going to transfer you up to the room. Then he pushed me in the elevator in the wheelchair and pressed the up button. Excuse me. As we waited for the elevator, the nurse had a puzzled look on his face. When we got to the floor, he took me to my room and told me he'd be my nurse for the rest of the day. He again looked puzzled and said, do I know you? I said, no. He said, Mr. Dindy, were you here last week? If you've been following the story, I wasn't in this hospital a week earlier. Where was I? I was in Phoenix Indian Hospital. I wasn't in Phoenix Thunderbird Hospital. I was in Phoenix Indian Hospital. Sorry. Sinuses, water, drinking. I said, no. You looked again, puzzled. Mr. Dindy, you were here last week. I said, no, I wasn't. And he asked, are you sure? And I'm thinking, wow, that's a crazy at the time. When I know that, I know that I had a stroke. I know that my friends, but you'd think I remember that I was at that hospital. And so anyways, I said no, and he asked if I was sure. I said, yeah, I'm sure. He told me to let him know if I needed anything. The puzzled look on his face was still there as he left. I wondered, what was this all about? My wife and some friends came to the room to see me. I thanked them for coming and told them I'd be here for a few days. I told them a story about the male nurse and his puzzled look. Later that same day, the male nurse came by to say goodbye to me and asked, so what do you do? I told him, I have a ministry to young people and I'm a DJ that plays 24/7 worship music wherever the Lord sends me. I told him that I'd leave him some worship music or worship CD at the nurse's station. He said, thanks. The nurse from the next shift came in, introduced herself, and she said, she was taking my blood pressure and some blood for labs, and the people from labs were coming over to take some of my blood. She told me she just got back from her vacation and it went by way too fast. I asked her how many years she'd worked at the hospital. She laughed and said, too many. I asked her if she believed in miracles. She said, oh yeah. She's seen the Lord do many in her life and in the hospital. She asked why I was here. I told her apparently to meet some of the hospital staff. and a few doctors. She smiled and said, I believe that. She told me they had scheduled me for a few tests the next days, and depending on what they found, I might be at the hospital for a few days. I told her that's the rumor that I've heard. I didn't get much sleep that night as they kept checking on me every few hours. Then the next morning I was greeted by another nurse with a heavy accent. As we spoke, I found out I have many friends from her country. She told me they would be taking me for a brain scan later that morning. I told her I'd been through the test a few times. She asked what had brought me there to the hospital, and I told her of the events of the Sunday morning at church. She asked if I was a Christian, and I told her I was. She asked for how long. I said, since January 1990. She asked, what do you do? And I explained to her the ministry the Lord had given me over the last 20 years at that time, with worship music and other types of Christian music. I told her I would give her some of my worship music when my friends came from church with my CDs. She was very excited about that. A technician arrived to take me for some tests. He looked at me and said, are you ready? He proceeded to wheel me in the wheelchair out to the elevator. He was bringing me to the hall. Actually, I was in a bed on this one. I just remember. I'm looking at it going, nope, that's not a wheelchair. I was in the bed at that time. I remember that. Bringing me to the hallway, just outside the room where they'd be doing my brain scan. He told me it was a very busy day and they would get to me as soon as possible. I just laid there in the bed and prayed for miracles for all the patients that went by and all the patients that I couldn't see. After an hour or so, they brought me into the room and laid me on the bed of this big machine. The doctor who was administering the test was talking with another doctor and said, I don't know why Mr. Dendy's back here for more tests. Say that again. I don't know why Mr. Dendy's back here for more tests. I still have the test results from when he was here last week. That's going to mess with some people as we continue on, but everything that happens to me, I always ask God, can you show me in Scripture everything you're asking me to do and some of the experiences that I have with you? And he has every time. She pulled up my tests on the computer screen in front of her and the other doctors to see. I looked over from where I was positioned and thought, did they just say what I thought they just said? The doctor said, we'll just do the test again. She came over and said, you need to be very still, Mr. Dendy. When we put you into this machine, I told her I was very familiar with the procedure. She looked at me and said, okay, thank you. After the scan was complete, the doctor said someone would be coming to take me back to my room. She said, I hope you don't have to come back here anytime soon. I laughed and said, me too. As I was waiting, she asked me, so what do you do, Mr. Dendy? I repeated the story that I had now told the others here in the hospital. She said that must be very rewarding. I told her it was very rewarding. Just then the technician arrived to return me to my room. En route, he asked if I'd ever been to this hospital before, that I looked very familiar. I told him I've never been here. Once back in my room, the nurse came in and informed me that I was scheduled for a heart stress test that afternoon. She asked if I had ever had a stress test before. I told her no. She told me, you'll do just fine. I looked at her like, what does that mean? Later that afternoon, another technician came to take me for more testing. So in my bed again, rolling down the hall, off we go to the stress test. There I met two nurses that would be assisting the doctor. I was joking with them as they told me what to expect and when the test started. They started what they would do, and they said, we're going to give you an injection, and the monitor will show us how your heart is reacting to the injection. And I said to them, how's your heart doing today? Do you have any unforgiveness, bitterness, or anger towards anybody? They both looked at me. They both looked at each other stunned, and then tears started to well up in their eyes. At that moment, the doctor walked in and introduced herself. She had that same puzzled look on her face I'd seen on people's faces ever since I got here at the hospital. She called another doctor in to join her and then started speaking in very quiet tones, discussing my case. I have to tell you, I did not like the stress test. Injecting me with something that speeds up your heart, not my favorite test at all. If you ever had that, no. But I made it, thank God. And I was thanking God. They monitored me for a while and then took me back to the room. Okay, now I've been at Thunderbird Hospital for 2 days. It appears that I was here last week, except I was at Phoenix Indian Hospital, not Thunderbird Hospital. So I'm asking God, was I here last week? And how is it that different people from different departments have records that I was in this hospital last week? All I heard from the Lord was, keep telling them about me and what I mean to you. Okay, Lord, I'll do it. My friends were in the waiting room when I returned from the stress test. I asked them, you still have the worship music playing at the church, right? They said, yes, 24/7. I told them, no matter what happens to me, still today, no matter what happens to me, make sure that music keeps playing at the church. Yeah, no matter what happens. This is what the fight's over and what it's all about. The enemy does not want 24/7 worship opening the heavens and bringing portals and people having an encounter with Jesus. And it's still going on, and I'm still experiencing this battle to the nth degree after 31 years. A few of my friends have my entire worship library on their computers. Back then it was CDs, and they're putting them on their computers too. So if it happens to me that the music, when something happens to me, they could continue on. Later that night, one of the doctors came by to give me the results of my heart stress test. She said, everything looks fine. You have a strong heart, and tomorrow we'll be taking you for a full range of ultrasound tests. I thanked him and looked at the test. He looked at the test results again, and he said, you have the heart of a teenager. I was 40-something at that time. I told him that would make sense since I've been ministering to young people. That's my ministry, and I laughed. He said he'd see me before I leave the hospital. And that was the third night. This was the third night I'd be sleeping in this room, and I was praying it would be my last. The next morning, a technician came to take me to an ultrasound appointment, this time in a wheelchair. When we arrived at the nurse's station for testing, there were 4 technicians standing behind the counter. They looked at each other and said, what's Mr. Dindy doing here again? They looked at the doctor's request for my ultrasound test and said, we ran the same test when he was here last week. Following me? Everybody following me? I was watching all 4 of them thinking to myself, am I invisible? I can see and hear everything they're saying. It's like they're having this conversation with each other and not thinking I'm about 15 feet away. It wasn't too much longer when one of them said, we're ready for me. They brought me into an examination room and told the tech, Mr. Dindy's back again. The technician looked over at me and asked what I was doing back. I told him I don't remember being here. He proceeded to tell me that I was here last week and they ran the same test then that they're asking to run today. He showed me a clipboard with some writing on it. I told him it's been a crazy couple of days for me, and I'm here, especially here at the hospital. So he started the ultrasound testing, and I shared with him the testimony of how I got saved. As he was finishing the testing, I told him the whole time that I've been here, God has been having me share my testimony and handing out worship CDs to different departments within the hospital. With the testing completed, I got a ride back to my room. My nurse informed me the doctor would get back to me sometime that afternoon. Later that afternoon, the doctor arrived and told me they found a mass on my adrenal gland, and they were going to have me come back to run some particular tests. The doctor indicated the rest of the tests, including blood and urine, came back fine. He said there were a few things that came back that were a little high, but nothing that would have you have this kind of reaction that put you here in the first place. It's possible it had something to do with your adrenal gland. I thanked him and told him I appreciated everything that was done to try to find an answer. The doctor said, we'll see you in about a week for your next appointment, and walked out of the room. The nurse told me they were getting my release papers ready and I should be discharged in about an hour. So after about 4 days in the hospital, I was released. I went straight back to the church where 24/7 worship music was still playing. I felt like I went right back to the front lines of the battle to continue the fight. I've done that many times. The next day, I drove across town to where my wife works to see her and let her know I was okay. As I was driving back to the church, I saw a vision of this huge screen in front of me, like I was in an outdoor drive-in movie theater. I saw this huge missile on the screen. It came out of the sky, and it was heading straight for my 18-foot cargo trailer at the church. My cargo trailer had all my DJ gear and equipment inside of it. The missile was as long as the trailer. As the missile got closer, I was waiting to see a huge ball of fire as the missile impacted the trailer. Just before the missile hit, I saw what looked like a bolt of blue lightning hit my trailer and surrounded it. It seemed to electrify the entire trailer. Including it was this blue electricity that was dancing around the trailer. Just then, the bomb hit the trailer, but didn't explode. You know, this time when I'm doing this, I'm driving on the freeway, and I have an open vision of everything I'm explaining to you right now. The bomb hit the trailer, but didn't explode. It just fell into the parking lot. I heard a very loud sound of metal hitting the parking lot. And I heard the Lord say to me, that was the enemy who sent the missile to take you out. But I sent my spirit and my power to protect you. He tried to kill you, but you are under my protection. You know, I'm going to share that with someone today. He's tried to kill you many times, but you're under the protection, under the blood of Jesus. Never forget that. He tried to kill you, but you're under my protection. Continue on with your assignment at the church. I said, Lord, I'm so grateful for your protection and your love over me and my family. This would not be my first or last time experiencing this blue lightning. Man, I got some stories for you and some evidence to go with it. This would not be my first time experiencing this blue lightning while being a part of where God would send me. And this would not be my last time I'd be experiencing somewhere or being transported from one place to another. In the Bible, you can hear there's a few times when some people were transported. True story, documented. How is it one week that I go to the Phoenix Indian Hospital and they believe I had a stroke, and the next week I'm having this situation at the church again, and I end up at Phoenix Indian Hospital and they tell me I was there the week earlier. Wow. Anyways, thank you so much. Like I said, I got a lot of other stories. I'm gonna share with you something, whoever, if I just reach one person who's watching this, to encourage them, to let you know you serve a supernatural God who loves you and can make a way where there seems to be no way. He can, and your time isn't up. I don't care. Your time's not up. My time's not up. He's extended my life. He's given me a few more years that he said for sure on this next assignment, and it's a 3-year assignment, and I'm just falling day in, day out. 3 years. You can't rent me. You can't buy me. You can support me. But my friend Pat Jordan says, you can't rent you or buy you. Nope. God's the booking agent. And so telling some of these backstories, I just wanted to share with you. I had other skill sets, as many of you do, and can do a lot of other things. Nothing that the Lord has asked me to do through all the fire, through all the whatever, would I really, that I don't regret it. It was part of who I am today. It makes me who I am right now. And who I'll be as God remind me that I'll be passing the mantle on to this next generation. It will be up to them how they run their race. And that is for all of us, right? How that you would run your race. So I pray now that God would use you and speak to you, and that you would see that he still has purpose for you. He still has a destiny over your life. That's a promise from God. I pray that you would surrender all that you have to him, and he will show you great and mighty things. It's not about stages and performance and lights and all this other stuff. It's about reaching the one. This story I just told you, I got to reach pretty much a whole hospital. Some other stories I'll be telling you, I got to reach a whole car business, and I'll be telling that story too. So, and how God has used me to reach 300 employees at a car dealership here in Phoenix, Arizona and beyond. So, and in all things, he gets all the glory and all the honor. So I do appreciate your prayers, the healing, support. You need to get rid of this. I'm going to need a new horse, a new mode of transportation, and God is working on that. And soon, hopefully soon, I'll be able to tell you that story. Thank you so much. God bless you. Never give up.